Hey everyone, this is CuePhoenix, your GosuDad, and welcome back to another edition of family-friendly, casual-friendly StarCraft 2 replay analysis. This is my 11th game in the 5th season of the Blizzard Online Ladder. This is the game I played a couple of evenings ago, not last night, but the previous night, I believe. You can look at my previous live cast on my channel, youtube.com/GosuDad. This was against my opponent, Asterioth, who is a new player to StarCraft 2, or at least new to the league's release. His account is. He only had 7 league wins at the end of this game, so we'll be checking out to see how he does. So if you watch the cast for this game when I played it live, you'll know that I did a build your own Banshee type of build, going for a 1-1-1 strategy of building a barracks, and then a factory, and then a starport, and then at some magical point taking all that stuff and plus a bunch of SCVs and going in for essentially an all-in attack. In this game, I was time limited. I had to finish the game in about 13 real-life minutes. So my guesstimate was to try to finish, try to do a finishing push by the 16-minute mark. I barely missed that. Finished the game. My opponent GG'd at 16:08. But I was very curious, nonetheless, to go back and see exactly what happened during this game to make the outcome what it was. Taking a look at my opponent sending his scouting probe out. This is Entombed Valley, I think it is. 4-player map, very symmetrical. So you can see that he is scouting out a... I'm not sure that any of these positions are really close. So I guess there are close positions, kind of, and cross positions. And you can see my SCV over here on the left-hand side on the mini-map going in the same direction that he is. But let's just take a look back at the economy here of both players. He's ahead on worker supply. I have 1 army supply compared to his nothing. His gateway's almost done. Seems like kind of a slow start for that gateway. Not sure he's going to be doing anything with it. Looks like he's making an initial zealot to bring to the front door, which will hold off my probe, mainly because my... Sorry, not my probe, my SCV. That's terrible. My SCV, who is going to search out another location. My suspicion up here was that there was nothing at that place, so that was a good idea on my part. He's ahead of me on worker supply by just 1, so we are keeping tied up with everything else. Going over to the income comparison, we can see that he has far more income than I do, but I am getting gas, so I'm going up for tech, whereas he is going... Looks like he's still chrono boosting out probes, which is fine. Let's get that flyover done with, and chrono boosting out a zealot, and he's got a zealot queued up, which is fine because that zealot came out. So he's actually fairly keeping up with things. But if you look at his minerals, can I look at that really easily? Resources is R? Yeah. If you look over here on his mineral count, he's banking a lot, and I'm not quite sure what he intends to do with that. Looks like he's putting a pylon down here at the expansion, so maybe looking to expand fairly early. He's almost supply block. There we go. Getting off of that supply block. So, okay, so now he's building a bunch of gateways. So now this is starting to look like... Oh, that's interesting. He's chrono boosted nothing out of his cybernetic score, so that's a misclick on his part. I'm guessing he was trying to research the warp gate technology, but he has no gas. So now he's running back and forth trying to get that gas running. 1 lone probe that's not doing anything. Protoss probes can run around and do stuff, start building without having to stick around, so that was just a little bit of a waste. He has a lot of potential supply, and these zealots, ooh, that guy has 2 kills and he has 0, so they're kind of putting some pressure up at the front for myself. So at this point, I think I would say that he's quite a bit ahead. He's ahead on worker supply. He hasn't made use of this pylon down at the base of his ramp. He has plenty of resources. He could have expanded long before this, which would have given him a huge economic advantage. He's unable to warp out these units, so he's having to slowly build them and using up his chrono boost on the units slowly being warped into the gateway instead of using the warp gate technology. Plenty of gas to do that technology now. Not Sure why he hasn't started that yet. So I think at this point he's still ahead, slightly ahead on worker supply, ahead on army supply, which is pretty good. Checking out the unit comparison tab, 7 zealots to 1 and 7. Now at this point, okay, I must be ahead on worker supply at this point. He has 21 workers to my 19. No, he's still ahead there. Now, but I have mules coming down, so I think that pretty much evens up the score economically. So at this point, we're fairly even, but I do have tech researched. I have Banshee coming out and a second tank coming out, but he is finally expanding and starting to use up that banked up resources, now finally researching that warp gate. So I think at this point, we're fairly even. You know, at this point I could have done a push. You know, I remember saying at the beginning of the game that I was going to do 2 pushes, and so now would have been the timing to do that push. I've got a couple of tanks and a bunch of Marines, put on some pressure, and then fall back for reinforcements, but I don't do that, and so it gives him an opportunity to get ahead in the macro game and in the army game, although he needs to get that pylon just started and that one on its way. So he is supply blocked at this point. Now he's starting to put down some tech, using up that gas on something zealot speed, which is very good. That's a very getting these zealots to run up to their targets very quickly is excellent. He has a lot of stored up minerals though, so he could be building quite a bit at this point. His warp gate is just finished just now, so he should be able to build a bunch of stalkers, warp them in. I think at this point we're still, yeah, see now my army supply is starting to kick in because I've you know, started to try to use up my minerals. So I think this is just a good example of players that are swinging back and forth on building their army versus using their production. He's not mining anything from these minerals or this gas. This base is all ready to go. Now just finally transferring some probes. He has a lot of economy, a lot of money, and you know, if you can imagine some of these matchups now with 8 more zealots, you know, what would that be like? This group here needs to wait for this these reinforcements here, and you know, with with the warp gate technology, he could even put a pylon here just so he can warp in guys closer to the front. Now I should be, I think this is where I was holding back, waiting for something. I can't remember what I was waiting for, but if you look at these tanks, their arcs cover this entrance ramp, so this entrance ramp is doubly bad for any units coming in there. And again, with that warp in technology, I mean, he could go ahead, now that he's on 2 base, he could go up to 8 gates at a time and be warping in 8 units at a time from both bases. If he, okay, now he's putting 4 probes on 1 gas. It's a slight misclick there. Okay, now he's moving a probe over there. So really, I think that I would just, I guess I would say, I would just pull this game off to being some inexperience on his part, or perhaps just a little rusty playing Protoss. He's got similar worker supply, although at this point he should be higher if he kept producing probes out of here. You've got a fully charged Nexus, which can either aid in the replenishment of units or in producing probes, again starting to queue up probes, which is very unnecessary. He's going to poke it up here. Now if he had waited for his observer to be built from his robotics facility, he would see the danger of coming into this area. Once you get hit by a couple of siege tanks, it's dangerous to run up the ramp. At this point, you know, as soon as I got that first or second hit, I would have turned around. And now he's at a severe army disadvantage, running those sentries back, which is excellent, and should be running the zealots back as well. Now at this point that he sees that I've basically sieged up in my base, that's actually good news for him. That means that his expansion is most likely safe, that he can go ahead and start macroing up. You can see him building his, well, he was building this thing, building his robotics facility, his robotics bay, excuse me. Boy, casual casting going on here. Hey, here's a proxy pylon to warp things up to the front, which is great, and he's got that vision with that Zelnaga tower, so he should be able to see that move out when it happens, and he should be able to warp and stuff at a pretty constant rate from these warp gates, which are all ready to go. Plenty of Chrono Boost on both Nexus, plenty of energy for Chrono Boost on both Nexus, so he should be able to pump out lots of units very quickly. It looks like he's just waiting on this Colossus. So I guess that would be maybe another note to remember when you're playing your own games, is that when you're waiting around for a particular technology to be built. I mean, these Colossus are only 300, 200. He could be warping in Zealots at this time or building warp gates, and oh, he lost all the units down here. That's a shame. No. The more expensive one's coming back here. So look, if you just look at this matchup, wow, that's a lot of stuff. Oh boy. I mean, there's really not that many tanks, and a fair amount of Banshees, but look at those Marines. That's almost 48 Marines. I guess it's about 40. Yeah, just shy of 40 Marines, and a whole stream of 5 coming in here. I think that was just me trying to catch up with that Marine production with off of 5 barracks. That's just a tremendous amount of army supply. And I guess just looking at this, looking at his resources, I mean, if you can imagine this force having, I don't know, having 11 Zealots and a Sentry, that would be, yeah, I just don't think 11 Zealots really would have done much of a difference. I'm gonna have to say that at this point, even without the SCVs, that's one of the things that definitely makes this an all-in, is the inclusion of the 14 SCVs in the mix. Basically says if I don't win, I'm going to lose. And I'm not sure, as I mentioned before, I think that one of the key points of him losing was that he had expanded, etc. But I just looking at what he has here at his expansion, looking at the units tab, he actually has the same amount of worker supply as I do. So he doesn't have double the workers. He doesn't have, double the buildings back in his base to produce units either. So I'm not really sure that I can say that it was this expansion that was causing him trouble. I think it's just that he didn't keep up with that production. As we mentioned before, he was waiting for this. I mean, it almost looks like he's not even going to build Colossi until this robotics bay has finished researching the thermal lance, which that takes quite a while to research. And I suppose as a note, he could go ahead and start building Colossi, and then when they come out, if they come out around the same time that the thermal lance is finished, that's the perfect timing. But waiting to start them until you've started on your robotics bay, I'm not sure that was. That's kind of bad timing on that part. And again, I'm not sure. I suppose if there were 16 more Zealots coming from another angle, they could do a terrible amount of damage to this group. Zealots are very good once they engage with their targets. So yeah, I mean, I think we're still on par, and I think it was just a matter of him not producing out of these warp gates at a constant rate. There's no reason for him. He's got plenty of supply, provided by the pylons. He's got a bunch of sentries with energy. He can actually, if he pulls them back, he can actually keep this front blocked for a long time, which was a great idea. It's these Banshees that are just going to cause him a terrible amount of trouble. And the Banshees focusing down the sentries. Yeah, I just think that it was just kind of bad timing on his part. Now, had he had the Colossi up, they could have done a terrible amount of damage too. You see, even though I've killed several sentries, he's been able to keep the main force out of this, out of the base, purely by using the force fields. So I think it really was that these Banshees focused on the sentries that really affected his defensive plans. But again, looking at the if we just take a look at the resources here, he could have easily had, I don't know, 10 more stalkers, and I think that would have made a significant difference. The 10 stalkers could have taken out the 4 Banshees, which would have prevented the vision from the tanks onto the high ground. And if these 4 Banshees had been taken out, the sentries would have stayed alive and kept me out of his base. So I guess I would just count this game up to just a faltering on that unit production. He had 2 bases going for quite a long time. He could have had twice as many workers as I did, and he had about the same. So I guess the lesson to learn from this game is to keep making workers, especially if you've taken the time to expand. Keep making workers out of both bases. Go ahead and hotkey them both together if you want. I do like to keep the backspace key lets you switch between the bases that you have, and you can attach that to other hotkeys. I attach it to a button on my mouse so I can switch back and forth. That's mainly useful for Zerg. But that and keeping these warp gates busy. I mean, these warp gates do have a recharge time, so you want to be keeping up with this production constantly. Just like back in the Terran base, we want to keep our buildings busy all the time. You want to do the same for the warp gates, unless you're going for some kind of strategy where you're going to build a whole bunch of warp gates, bank up a ton of money, and then warp them in all at once, which is another strategy and is fine as well. But in this case, he kept to the 4, which if you're just going to stay on 4, you really need to keep them busy all the time and keep your units alive. He did lose a really big group up here. If we imagine this final encounter with this money spent plus the previous group that he had, it would have been a pretty close fight. But he basically lost, oh boy, I don't know, maybe 15 units just by charging up the ramp after knowing that there was a siege tank at least here. And as soon as he felt 2 hits of a siege tank being in a row, you just go ahead and back off. There's no point in trying to rush up a ramp in that situation. And in his case, I really think expanding was fine. I think he would have won this game had he made some of those minor changes that we just discussed. So, great. Yeah, good game, good replay. And we'll talk to you guys later. This is CuePhoenix, your GosuDad, signing out. See you later, bye.